Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosts Chinese leader Xi Jinping on state visit. Plus, protest continues over French pension reforms as government barely survives no confidence vote. Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin have restated their strong relations following talks between the two leaders in Moscow this week. Their meeting, which took place under the shadow of Russia's onslaught in Ukraine, left no question about Beijing's commitment to developing its relations with Moscow, despite President Putin's growing isolation on the global stage as Russia's invasion continues into its second year.
President Vladimir Putin welcomed Chinese leader Xi Jinping at the Kremlin on Tuesday for a visit focused on the Ukraine crisis and Russia's deepening economic ties with China. The two presidents shook hands and stood side by side for the playing of the national anthems before heading into the talks. The two leaders discussed plans to ramp up Russian energy exports to China, hopes that Chinese firms would replace Western businesses in Russia, and the Chinese leaders' proposed peace plan for the war in Ukraine. President Putin said Russia was satisfying what he called the growing Chinese energy demands.
Trade and economic cooperation has been and remains a priority for us, which is quite natural, given that China firmly holds the position of our country's leading foreign trade partner.
On his part, President Xi thanked his Russian counterpart for the invitation and praised relations between both countries.
The relations between China and Russia are developing steadily in a healthy way thanks to common efforts. The political trust between our countries strengthens, the common interests multiply, and the nations are getting closer. The cooperation in trade, investment, energy, culture, humanitarian and interregional areas is developing.
The leaders reportedly spoke for more than 4 hours and enjoyed a state dinner at the Kremlin, warmly praising each other as a dear friend. President Xi's visit is a boost to Putin as he struggles to make ground in the year-long invasion of Ukraine. While China has sought to cast itself as a potential peacemaker in the conflict, Beijing's proposed ceasefire has so far been largely dismissed in the West as a ploy to buy Putin time. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticised the visit, which comes after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin for alleged war crimes.
That President Xi is traveling to Russia days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for President Putin suggests that China feels no responsibility to hold the Kremlin accountable for the atrocities committed in Ukraine, and instead of even condemning them, it would rather provide diplomatic cover for Russia to continue to commit those very crimes. Calling for a ceasefire that does not include the removal of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory would effectively be supporting the ratification of Russian conquest. It would recognize Russia's attempts to seize the sovereign neighbor's territory by force. It would enable Russia to further entrench positions in Ukraine. And a ceasefire now, without a durable solution, would allow President Putin to rest and refit his troops and then restart the war at a time more advantageous to Russia. The world should not be fooled by any tactical move by Russia, supported by China or any other country, to freeze the war on its own terms. Such a move would violate the UN Charter and defy the will of 141 countries who have condemned Russia's war in the United Nations General Assembly.
China has refrained from condemning Russia or referring to Moscow's intervention in its neighbour as an invasion. It has also criticised Western sanctions on Russia. Washington has said in recent weeks it fears China might arm Russia, a plan Beijing has denied. Meanwhile, in a surprise visit pointedly coinciding with Xi's Moscow talks, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited Kyiv on Tuesday delivering a message of solidarity and support for Ukraine.
Dozens of people were arrested across France this week following violent protests after President Emmanuel Macron's government narrowly survived a no-confidence motion in Parliament on Monday. The unrest is over a deeply unpopular pension reform, which would raise the retirement age by 2 years to 64. Trade unions have promised to intensify their strike action, leaving President Macron to face the most dangerous challenge to his authority since the Yellow Vest uprising over 4 years ago.
Chaos on the streets of Paris on Monday, just hours after French President Emmanuel Macron's government narrowly survived a no-confidence vote over its plans to raise the retirement age by 2 years to 64. Protesters, angry about the proposed reforms, set fire to piles of garbage and other debris in the streets. Firefighters were seen scrambling to put out burning rubbish piles left uncollected for days due to strikes as protesters played cat and mouse with police. As the protest turned violent, several people were detained. There were similar scenes in the French cities of Lille and Bordeaux, where hundreds of people gathered and chanted "Macron resign." In Lille, police used tear gas to disperse demonstrators. Protesters have vowed to continue to take to the streets. Some protesters say they are surprised the vote of no confidence failed, and they will continue to take to the streets.
Just like everyone, I am very disappointed and angry. I don't think this motion of no confidence being struck down in the parliament puts an end to the fight against the extraordinary social regression that this bill represents, against which the Human Rights League has been fighting from the beginning.
The vote of no confidence being struck down is not a huge surprise for us. Of course, it will only make the movement bigger, and it is far from being the last weapon we have in this political, social, and institutional crisis.
Earlier in the day, 278 French MPs backed a tripartisan no-confidence motion in Macron's government, just 9 short of the 287 needed for it to succeed.
Sur la force de ces principes.
President Macron says his pension reforms are necessary to keep the pension budget afloat. Opponents say his decision to bypass a parliamentary vote on the pension bill, which triggered the no-confidence motions, has undermined his reformist agenda and weakened his leadership. Earlier in the day, 278 French MPs backed a tripartisan no-confidence motion in Macron's government, just 9 short of the 287 needed for it to succeed.
Sur la force de ces principes.
President Macron says his pension reforms are necessary to keep the pension budget afloat. Opponents say his decision to bypass a parliamentary vote on the pension bill, which triggered the no-confidence motions, has undermined his reformist agenda and weakened his leadership. As soon as the narrow failure of the vote was announced, lawmakers from the hard LFI party shouted "resign" at Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne and brandished placards that read, "We'll meet in the streets." Unions and opposition parties have vowed to step up protests to try to force a U-turn.
Over in South Africa, the country's second largest opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, says it has begun a process of registering their displeasure at the ANC-led government. What they want is an end to rolling power blackouts in the country and for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step down. To send their message home, they staged what they called a national shutdown this week, which had the nation on edge, resulting in the deployment of soldiers for a month across the country. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, has more.
protests are a dozen a day in South Africa. So how come this one, called by the economic freedom fighters, is having the country on edge? Over 3,000 soldiers have been deployed across South Africa to work with the police, of course, in order to help maintain law and order. Government says this is to avert the situation experienced in July 2021, where riots and looting were recorded in several provinces in the country, and that left about 400 people dead. Earlier on Monday, incidents were already recorded, but the National Joint Operations led by the Police Minister Bheki Cele reassured people that everyone will be protected.
We hope that those that will be marching, as long as they do peacefully, we have no reason of interfering with them.
Many businesses took the precaution of keeping their doors shut. Security was tight at the OR Tambo International Airport, but flights took off and landed. In Alexandra Township, several groups of EFF T-shirt wearing protesters merged for a further protest march to the high-end area Sandton close by, as directed by the EFF second-in-command, Floyd Shivambu, before they ended at the electricity company, Eskom.
Today's shutdown, we want Ramaphosa to step down. We want Ramaphosa to resign. We want electricity back. So fighters, let us remain disciplined.
Hundreds of EFF protesters made their way to Pretoria's Church Square, demanding that President Cyril Ramaphosa step down. Some schools and businesses have been closed. However, public transport was not disrupted. After a long wait, the EFF leader, Julius Malema, eventually addressed the crowd.
Close all of this because the whole world must know there is shenanigans going on in this country. Our people stay in the shacks. Our people don't have water. Our people don't have electricity. This machine I'm running, none of them, none of their great-grandfathers, grandfather, grandfather, whatever in their family has ever done this. They will not do it themselves, and their children will never do it. I know, I've lived with them. They suffer from political jealousy.
There were also other non-EFF supporters of the protest.
One thing which is common between the two of us is that the common denominator is load shedding. But as you are aware, the United Democratic Movement had filed a case against Eskom and the government.
Well, the protest is significant on many fronts. But in the first instance, it is indicative that the people of this country are surely starting to lose faith and trust in the judiciary, because the matters for which there is a protest today ordinarily could have been resolved by a course of action called mandamus, whereby a political party or a civil society organization could actually approach the courts to force the government, in this particular instance, to be able to provide the very services which, of course, are the source of today's protest action as well as the national shutdown.
And I'm happy that the message that comes from this national shutdown is that the Ramaphosa regime must go, that electricity must be returned to our people, that basic services must be delivered, running water, proper housing, proper education, all of which this government has failed to do.
According to the police, 87 people have been arrested and 24,300 tires confiscated from protesters. While the protest was mostly peaceful in some provinces, police has had to use rubber bullets and tear gas in places like KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape to bring about law and order. Across the country, the security agencies remain on high alert to curb any chaos that may erupt.
While Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, millions of Muslims around the world feel the pinch of inflation as the holy month of Ramadan begins. More after the break. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. People in Pakistani cities typically throng wholesale markets, making bulk purchases of food and provisions in preparation for the holy month of Ramadan. This year, however, residents in Islamabad and Karachi are feeling the pinch of rising prices amid decades-high inflation and a crippling economic slowdown.
And after over 12 to 18 hours of fasting, people try to enjoy iftar by eating with family and friends. But many people in Pakistan this year are having to limit their purchases due to rising prices and economic difficulties.
Everything has become too costly. The government should reduce prices because of Ramadan. They should think of the Muslims who are fasting. Even medicines have become more expensive.
Prices have really gone very high this year. What can a poor person do? We can't buy anything. I'm a working woman myself, but even I'm struggling.
Here, the cash-strapped South Asian nation marks Ramadan as it awaits a bailout package of $1.1 billion from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Inflation last month surged to 31.5%, its highest level since 1974.
Inflation has risen so much that dates that were selling for 200 rupees per kilogram last year are now priced at 500 rupees. At the same time, petrol, bus fares, rent and other expenses have also increased tremendously. What can we do? Where should we go? Who should we complain to? There's no one who will listen to our problems.
On top of economic woes, the political standoff between supporters of ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan and security forces persists amidst multiple legal proceedings against the former cricket star. The charges, which Khan denies, began after he was ousted from office in a parliamentary vote early last year. Since then, the 70-year-old politician has been demanding a snap election and holding protests across the country. Current Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has rejected Khan's demands, saying an election will be held as scheduled later this year.
You never looked at it.
Khan, who was shot and wounded while campaigning in November, also says the threat to his life remains.
This assassination attempt on me, so the powerful people are behind it, and my life is even more at threat than it was then, because these people are worried, all sitting in powerful positions, that if I come back into power, which they know in elections we will win, so they're trying to make sure that I don't get there. There's one time that we can actually move our democratic process forward and really have an empowered democracy in Pakistan.
Meanwhile, some feel ordinary citizens are paying the price of the political infighting.
The real cause of inflation is the chaos in the country. There is no law. As long as this chaos remains, and without stability in the country, prices will not come down. I appeal to the rulers to put an end to the differences, their quarrels, the protests and rallies.
Struggling to keep the economy afloat, Pakistan is taking tough measures, including increasing taxes and energy prices and allowing its currency to weaken to restart the $6.5 billion IMF loan package. The funds will offer some relief to a nation still reeling from a dollar shortage that has raised the probability of the economy slipping into a recession ahead of elections this year.
It's a similar case in Indonesia, where rising inflation has put a dampener on people's spirits in the lead-up to the Eid al-Fitr festival. Food and energy prices have been soaring around the world as Russia's war in Ukraine, the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and climate change-related events weigh on the global economy.
Residents in Jakarta shopping for the cheapest fish, meat and vegetables feel the pinch of rising prices as they prepare for the holy month of Ramadan. Indonesia's consumer price index has accelerated to 5.47% in February this year, compared to 2.64% in March last year during the then Ramadan month, according to latest central bank data.
We used to be able to prepare food for 2 days. Now we can only do day by day because prices for chicken are soaring. Every food price is also soaring. I'm hoping that everything can go back to normal because prices have gone up several times.
Indonesian food prices typically rise ahead of the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which has further compounded since last year by a shortage of crude palm oil, leading to a rise in cooking oil prices. Despite the economic situation, shoppers are eager to spend compared to a year ago when lingering coronavirus lockdown measures held people back from gathering in large numbers and limited their purchases.
We are hoping for more sales during this season. A lot of people are shopping, so it's good.
Recent reports of a tax scandal in Indonesia involving mid and high-ranking officials exacerbated by social media posts showing the lavish lifestyles of family members of public officials has also highlighted the income disparity in the country.
We hope Allah can give guidance to our leaders so they can change, because this current economic condition is caused by extensive corruption.
To help Indonesians deal with inflation worsened by expected dry weather and dropping food output, the government has announced it will provide social assistance by distributing rice, eggs and chicken during Ramadan.
And finally, on the program, for Ukrainian ballerina Gana Muromtseva, being able to perform again is a dream come true. She fled Kyiv over a year ago on a packed train after the Russian invasion, not knowing if she would ever dance on a stage again.
In Budapest's magnificent opera house, Ukrainian ballerina Gana Muromtseva moves graciously in the lead role of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake Ballet. Muromtseva was at the peak of her career at the National Opera of Ukraine when the war rewrote all her plans. A year ago, she boarded a packed train for a grueling 12-hour journey with thousands of refugees also fleeing the Ukrainian capital. The 29-year-old, her mother and grandmother, found refuge in Belgium. Being able to perform again is a dream come true.
My decision was to pack my laptop or to take pointe shoes because it was heavy. So I did not take anything. I just had to leave everything. When I left Kyiv, I even did not count that I will dance any day again. I was like, I said bye-bye to my career.
After a year of trying to survive from one day to another and rebuilding herself as a dancer physically and mentally, she now feels back on top.
We call it work-life balance. No, it's not work-life balance anymore. It was difficult. Now it's getting a little bit easier because I have to work with my mental health, as everyone actually have to do, because almost 40 million of people get trauma now. It was really difficult because I could do my job here, I could work, and now it's the same. I will be totally focused in studio till the last minute. But sometimes I came home here and I just had to cry all tears down.
With the war still raging, she has no plans to return to Ukraine, but hopes to perform there again in the future. Her contract has been extended for another year in Budapest, and this is how long she can plan ahead right now.
I'm waiting for this day that one day I can dance at Kyiv stage again. But for now, I have contract here. My decision is to stay here.
Her mother and grandmother returned to Kyiv last year, and she's happy to be close to them in a neighboring country in case they need help.
And that's the programme today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.